Bridge a gap is pretty huge when we're talking about a conflict zone. Those were some of the small level impact and things that we were looking at program implementation wise.
And the second thing that totally stands out to me is this call for organizational change and balancing the risk that people have to take on.
There is a whole tech for good and AI for good. And, despite that, I think that really keeping people at the forefront. AI is not a fad, as much fun as those are. I also want to be part of the solution. I want to be part of the movement that brings something great.
Welcome to another episode of AI Product Leader. Every week we shine a light on what it takes to join the AI world. Real conversations with real AI builders, founders, product leaders, AI experts, technologists, and everything in between to understand where the world of AI is right now and what that path looks like, whether you're building AI products or building a career in AI. I'm your host, Polly Allen. I'm the founder of AI Career Boost, where I spend my time helping product leaders and innovators navigate the world of AI and thrive in AI roles. And I've spent my career on both the product development and software development sides of the fence of AI. I'm an ex-Alexa AI principal product manager, where I successfully launched the very first generative AI answers on Alexa back in 2020. And I'm super excited to welcome our guest today, Rachel. Rachel Beck is a global leader in business intelligence and analytics with 15 years of transforming complex data into actionable insights that drive program impact and investment. With deep experience across nonprofits, international development, and mission-driven tech, she's led business intelligence strategy for $70 million plus portfolios, launched global management systems used in over 50 countries, and unified KPIs to unlock tens of millions in additional funding. Armed with dual master's degrees in data science and public administration, Rachel's now focused on integrating AI into inclusive and user-centered systems that scale social impact while mentoring the next generation of analytics and product leaders. Rachel, so great to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much, Polly. It's great to be here. And thank you for such a wonderful introduction.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad it's resonating. I was super excited to have you today because you come from such an interesting background, over 15 years working in some of the most diverse and exciting setting locations. Never a dull moment, I'm sure. Can you tell us
Never,
just a little bit
never.
more about your background in the international development space?
Sure. After getting my master's in public administration, I really wanted to focus on having overseas and international experience. And I was fortunate enough to launch my career with a global nonprofit, funny enough, in South Sudan, which at the time was a brand new country.
What a place to launch.
And so, for those who don't know, South Sudan is in East Africa, and it is the newest country in the world, I believe, still.
Wow.
They gained their independence in 2011. And so I started there as a manager for data and analytics systems and business intelligence. Um, and at the time, it was not a conflict zone when I landed there. And about a year and a half after I started there, civil war broke out. And so our context shifted dramatically
Mhm.
overnight, pretty much. Yeah, so it's wild. So in many parts of the world, there's a rainy season and a dry season. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night and was like, why am I hearing thunder? Like it's the dry season. It shouldn't be raining. And then the next, rolled over, was like, oh, climate change, rolled over, went back to sleep. And the next morning when I looked at my phone getting up for work, it was like lockdown, civil unrest, do not leave your house, your
What
compound.
was what was the thunder then? It was like gunfire or
The
like
thunder was not thunder. The thunder was the initial armed attack. Yeah, they a an arms storage. There was fighting at an arms storage, and some of it blew up. And so what I was hearing
wow.
was the initial onset of what turned into a civil war. Um, so we were on lockdown for multiple days. Eventually, I was evacuated through the U.S. government. It was finally safe to move, and went back to the US, went back to Michigan, which is where I'm from, had a little bit of downtime. And as you know, at that point I was a manager in my career, and there were a couple of folks above me in our country leadership, and I was just waiting to hear from them, like what's next? What are we going to do?
Mhm.
And I realized everybody was just resting, and I was like, no, we can't rest not too long. Like we have to pivot. We
We're on a
have to figure
mission.
out what comes next.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, like you think about crisis and, maybe it sounds kind of funny to say, but like a war zone in South Sudan obviously turned into a crisis, right? And what are we going to do? But it's not so dissimilar. I think now with AI and all of the change that's happening, people are literally like, well, what do we do?
Right. It's a
Where do we
kind of
start? How
constant
do we
risk
navigate
management.
this? And
Yeah.
so it's funny to think, in terms of risk management, also, when things shift so dramatically, like how do you handle it? I'm not sure I ever really thought that that would be so applicable now in such a different context.
Exactly.
Um, but
Yeah.
really, it is.
And as far
Yeah.
as more that context, a lot of people maybe aren't familiar with the kind of work that your organization was doing in South Sudan and how like the data and analytics drove the insights and decisions. Are you able to share like what kind of data would drive what kind of decisions in that context?
Sure. So, funny enough, we did peace building. So it
Well,
gets
it
even
sounds
more
like you're not
ironic.
very good.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. Um, and so peace building, the work that we were doing was intending to bring different communities together to share stories, to unpack, the narratives that they had told themselves, their families through generations, and to rebuild connections across tribal lines. As part of any sort of direct implementation work, you know, you're measuring the numbers of things, right? Did these meetings happen?
Hmm.
Who's attending? But then you're also measuring, well, the so what, right?
Yeah.
What's the actual impact of that? Is there any interaction or, reaching out between these different groups to collaborate or cooperate around new areas in their life, right?
Mm,
Do you see them maybe sharing transportation to get their produce to market together, right? If they're living side by side. So
mm,
it could be small things, but those are actually really big transformative processes that
yeah.
happen when you're able to go from we won't talk to somebody, we might even fight them, to, well, wait a second, we could share resources and both benefit by
Yeah.
coming together. Bridging that gap is pretty huge when we're talking about a conflict zone. So those were some of like the small level impact and things that we were looking at, program implementation wise. And when it came to our whole, world basically turning upside down, it was now, well, okay, we have this expertise in peace building. There's now a civil war. To what degree are we still relevant and how?
Hmm.
Right? And most of our programming was implemented through local government and the government bodies, which is pretty standard no matter what country you work in international development. And we realized, well, the government is one party in the civil war. So they're no longer the correct partner for us,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Needing to have peace, right? There may be a larger conflict going on, but what could we do at the local level,
Yeah.
right? How do we think about the whole picture? What's the right entry point for us? And who might those partners be to remain relevant?
Yeah.
Um, so that was part of the consideration. The other part of the consideration was, you know, you have to scenario plan a little bit, right? So
Mm,
anytime something completely changes, you have to think about, well, what are my options? One option is to do nothing. One
hmm.
option is to pack your bags up and say, cool, we tried. This is more than we can handle, and we're going to close up shop. Or, in the case of companies thinking about AI, maybe they're like, we're just going to wait and see,
Right.
right? It's an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Totally.
is.
But what do you
And
lose?
then there's also, right. And then there's also that transformative option of thinking, well, what could I do? What am I best placed to do? And how much investment do I have? What am I willing to spend? And what's my level of appetite for risk
Yeah.
to go and say, I'm going to try this?
Yeah.
And
Abs-
that I think is a really critical conversation, and one that I basically called up our headquarters office and was like, I'm coming to DC now,
Yeah.
and we're gonna start having these conversations. We got to figure this out. And they were like, okay, come. And I was like, thank goodness. And that literally was the CEO's question. Is he was like, are we going to pivot completely and
Yeah.
be a humanitarian organization, Or are we going to try and still do peace building? And what would that look like? And he was like, Rachel, figure it out.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I'm collaborating, coordinating with our team, across
Yeah.
countries, as well as the DC team, trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like? Um, and also with our donors, our investors, right? Do
Right.
they have an appetite for risk? Are they going to let us keep that funding if we figure out how to transform what we're doing?
Right.
Um, so fortunately, we were able to transform our programming. We decided to split our approach. So our peace building program, we decided to partner with um, the church and a
Mm,
group, the five heads of churches, because when people are in times of crisis, who do they turn to? They
right.
turn to their spiritual leaders.
Hmm.
And these are the people that they consistently have trust in. And so by forming a partnership with the heads of the churches, it allowed us to maintain that sense of trust with communities and that this was still a worthy endeavor. And there was still, large
Yeah,
community support for it.
totally.
And so it ended up being a really fruitful partnership and shift for that type of programming. We had water programming, so trying to improve clean water. We did that in the displacement camps. So that's a big shift in terms of the types of approaches we would take, but we found it more relevant there.
Yeah.
So, we really had to think critically about all of our different programs, what we were doing, and how that would be received. Our donors were actually really happy to continue their investment.
Hmm.
And the peace building program in particular was so highly received, we actually got additional investment the
Oh,
following
amazing.
year. Yeah.
Amazing. So you turned it around
So,
into something that was bigger than what you had originally.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, incredible.
Exactly.
Well, there's so many parallels here to what's going on, what leaders are navigating in AI right now. The first one that just came to mind as we were talking is that idea of trying to find like the real hard KPIs from something that feels very qualitative or like social sciencey, right? You were talking about, hey, how do we measure? Are these groups actually working together, right? Often people think of data and analytics as this very like, I'm good at math and spreadsheets. I made sure the
Right,
spreadsheets add up.
right. Yeah. And that's true, I think, in a lot of cases, but to me, the best part of data analytics is always the qualitative piece.
Yeah,
It is your why, it is your how, it is
absolutely.
the meaning and the explanation behind the figures,
Yeah,
right? And so that's always a little bit messy, but it's always the juiciest and it always has the most information is always there. And so I think I've always gravitated toward that side of the analytic spectrum.
yeah,
And we'll get to that and how it connects to actually the product that I've developed. But that's kind of why I gravitate in that sort of messy research space because that's where the gold mine is.
absolutely.
That's where
Yeah,
that's how
absolutely.
you also, I think, build your story of impact. It has to
Mhm.
come from that.
Totally.
And that's always the information about your users, what they're struggling with, what they want, what they need. And what resources they have available or not, and how do we fill those gaps? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's one of the biggest challenges I'm finding with companies adopting AI is they're very used to like, did users click on it, like and having quantifiable data. But all of a sudden, if you're trying to evaluate, is this summary better than that summary? It's becoming much more of those like you have to take something that feels very ineffable and actually boil it down to what can we measure, and how do we actually make sure this is a number that means something, right? It sounds like that was
Right,
you having to
right.
do
How many
both
times
things
does it
together.
get them to stop, right?
Yeah,
Where
totally,
you know that the query has ended, right? In a chat,
totally,
feature,
totally.
for example. It's not just are they using it, are they coming
Yeah,
back? At what frequency are
yeah,
they coming back?
totally. Is
And I mean, and what areas of their life are they expanding from, oh, this is just a professional inquiry or they want to write a LinkedIn post, right? As we
right.
all know, that's our favorite use for ChatGPT. But there's does it then transcend into their personal life, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Exactly. No, totally. And then the second thing that totally stands out to me is this call for organizational change and balancing the risks that people have to take on, right? There's so much in the news these days about, oh, we don't need the product management function and we can just automate PRDs and create prototypes, right? But that process of getting alignment, like in your case from the donors, and actually making sure people on the ground still trust you enough to actually speak to you,
Right.
that's not a document. That's not a, you couldn't have done that with a prototype, right?
No, exactly. And this is when you build in, effective risk management processes throughout your AI development pipelines. Like it has to be throughout the whole system to be thinking about risk to be effective in managing it. It
Totally.
can't it can't be something you tack on at the end like, "Oh, we thought about it," or "We think we thought about it." Right?
Exactly.
And ultimately, AI is meant to be a tool that supports people.
Yeah.
And so if we're not using risk management to think about people, I think we're missing a key component of what we should be doing.
Absolutely. And coaching an organization through a big change like this. So not only were you're having to present to them, hey, there's a risk of standing still. There's no risk option on the table. What pick the one that is going to have the biggest impact. Um, and then getting a whole organization aligned with that. What was your biggest challenge in getting others in your organization bought in on this change?
I think there was a disconnect and this created in understanding what each of the options were
Mm,
across all key stakeholders.
yeah,
And so not everyone, even in the same company, speaks the same language. And so ensuring that everybody had a full understanding of what the options were, what they meant, and then the follow-on implications of those, right? And I think also what it means for their departments, right?
right.
That has to trickle down. Management needs clear messaging for their teams, right? And how that then aligns with what the organization is trying to achieve. Everything needs to come back to those outcomes,
Yeah.
right? So that's a key aspect of also risk management is ensuring that your teams are aligned with what you're doing because that then also motivates them when they feel like they know what's going on, they're part of that process. And it builds excitement and momentum throughout the organization, which is critical.
Incredible. Well, Rachel, it sounds like you bring such a wealth of experience in turning a large organization around under what we talk a lot about risk management in AI, and the risks are hardly as real and as visceral as a civil war erupting around you. But being able to turn an organization around when the risks are that high, and getting everyone aligned, huge accomplishment, and so needed in today's economy. So as we're seeing in the headlines every day, there's some new
Right.
bomb dropping from an AI company that has had
Exactly.
risk realized, right?
Yeah,
That it's a lot of
exactly.
crisis management and pivoting, but a lot of that handling that well involves preparing ahead of time and having people understand what they're getting into.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
Totally.
course correcting, right?
Mhm.
It's okay to not get it all right the first time, right? What matters is that we slow down enough to be intentional. And I think as we're seeing this almost like rat race and nobody can move fast enough, this is when we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think the risk management side of things is often forgotten, but is often the most critical.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose your customers' trust, right?
Right.
When you make these big mistakes, people question, should I be using that tool? Should I be engaging and learning this new technology? And I think that AI has so much potential to do so much good that it
Mhm.
would be such a disservice if people, you know, were scared or didn't feel
Right.
like they had the tools or knowledge to be able to engage. And so
Totally.
I think,
Or we blow
we've got
things
to
up
focus on that
before the good people get to it. That's why we can't have nice things. Hopefully, we get to keep the nice
too.
part. Amazing. So you have been working in AI. I'm so excited because you're actually launching your own AI product. Can you tell us a little bit about it and the genesis of that?
Sure. So I'm going to take us a little bit back to our research, to this research background and qualitative analysis background that I have. So when I was thinking about what type of product to develop, I was sort of, I think I leaned back into what I know best, which is not a bad place to start, I think. And so I was thinking, okay, if we're going to be developing a product, if there's got to be a problem and we've got to have users, but then we've got to understand the market
Hmm.
and we've got to understand what's already out there. And I thought this is the first place where that qualitative analysis is really going to be instrumental in understanding the landscape to be able to clearly define what this product can and should be, and how is it different from everything else that's out there. So
In a
that's the
world
product that I
where
built.
building is cheap, you need to know your differentiation up front, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
And so that's exactly what I built. Was a tool that would allow product managers, founders, researchers to be able to do their competitive analysis in a meaningful and deep way. I say that with us all knowing, of course, that AI does not yet reason, right? So the idea for me was also to test and see how deep of research could I do? What would that analysis look like using, multiple models and thinking about how can we layer analytics to be able to get a more refined, deeper, more meaningful response. Um, and so that was a key consideration for me as I was developing this was like, how can I get to depth? Because
Mhm.
that's where the good stuff is.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So, can you tell us a little more about like what people get from using this product?
Sure. So people get essentially product brief and
Mhm.
their deck for their teams
Oh, amazing.
that has their key direct and indirect competitors
Mhm.
and all the sort of top line information that you need about those competitors.
Oh, amazing.
You also get clear information about what those companies are doing well and where there may be opportunities for differentiation.
Mhm.
And ultimately, it gives a recommendation after doing a series of different analytical steps, gives a recommendation for your product and
Nice.
your product idea
Yeah.
based on, of course, the user segment that you define in the beginning. And so it will tell you, like, this is how you can differentiate in this market. This is what others are doing. This is what you should avoid, your mistakes to avoid.
Mhm.
This is where, there's basically more space in the market and how to be successful.
How to be
And
successful, how to crack that egg. And
mm,
I remember seeing the demo of it and being really taken aback by, especially when you hear the idea, people might think, oh, well, I can just ask ChatGPT for that information,
mm,
right? Can't I just use deep
right,
research? But the key
right,
here is one, I think you've vetted that process from your years of experience and knowing exactly, hey, not only how to do that research appropriately with the right sources, but also here's like the actual insights that are useful. People don't know what they don't know or don't know what to ask. But
right,
the second
right.
one
And so,
was that
mhm,
human in the loop element, right? Can you tell us a little bit
yes,
more about that approach that you took here?
yes, exactly. So, and this is sort of how you differentiate, like how me I'm differentiating my different customer segments, right? So a product manager may not really want to get into the weeds in the research, but your head of research is absolutely going to want to, right?
Yeah.
And so I've built in, or I'm building in, so this will probably be a second phase, building in a human in the loop aspect
Hmm.
to allow, if somebody wants to be able to edit or refine the outputs at a series of stages throughout the process, that they're basically able to interact with the research process.
Yeah.
They're able to say, no, I don't think that's right. These models are not perfect.
Exactly. We've seen
They
or
may
even
also be able,
generic.
yeah, right? Or I want to reframe how something is phrased, or I want to add in information that's missing to be able to then finalize what each of those stages.
Yeah.
And then that would then feed into the next stage of the process to then be able to improve and have a more refined output.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And just with more insight as if you steer it along the way, right? Absolutely.
Right, exactly.
Fantastic.
Ideally, these tools are supposed to be in support of us, not
Right.
to replace us. And
Totally.
especially given the limitations that we know of all of the models, even though they're improving so rapidly, it's important that we're part of that process and understanding what's coming in and being able to say, yeah, that's right, but maybe this isn't.
Totally makes sense. So before you built this product, did you have experience with AI before? I know you had deep experience with analytics and data. We're deep in that stuff. Had you worked in AI before?
Yes, foundationally, yes.
Yeah.
So I have a master's degree in data science.
Hmm.
So that was a good starting point for machine learning. That was actually my favorite course, testing different models and fine tuning and all of that good stuff. And then in my most recent role, I had the opportunity. They actually had a generative AI sort of custom for social impact organizations custom GPT. So
Yeah.
you would basically, an organization that decided to pilot it would give us a series of research documents. So it's very common in the social impact space to do an impact evaluation, right? How well did we implement the project? But also, what was the impact that we had? How did lives
Mm.
change as a
Yeah.
result of the work that we did? And that is all, those are all research documents, those are all papers. And so oftentimes they get done to prove efficacy, right? Quality of work, and then they sit on a shelf.
Yeah.
And when you do that over years, over time, you've got a plethora of knowledge and information, as well as impact data
Totally.
that, companies aren't using. And so it was an opportunity for us to pilot with a very large, well-known international development organization that they piloted the product with a series of their evaluations.
Oh,
And
neat.
then I worked with them to be able to pull out what was the impact that we had over this 5-year period in the health sector, in livelihoods, in supporting women's health, in economic opportunities, whatever the case may be. And that was a really, really interesting process. It was part, I think it was the first time that I really interacted in such a meaningful way with an actual AI tool.
Hmm.
It was the first time I had seen a multi-agent system,
Yep.
um, and getting to then use that. And then also not only producing, sort of a deck and helping this organization understand what they can get out of this system, but then also helping them understand how do they use it. And there's a lot of fun in helping people to understand how to prompt and how to think through the
Hmm.
level of information that you provide, and what's going to get you to what you're looking for.
Right.
Um, so
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And so for folks, it's quite the transformation that you had this very like data analytical background, but now you're using generative AI, both in terms of these multi-agent systems, actually being able to build your own generative AI system. How did you get started with generative AI coming from that data and analytics background?
I think that I've always been a curious person and wanting to learn. I have 2 master's degrees. It's part of the process. It's also part of it's the best part of analytics, right? The
Mhm.
whole point is to learn
Yeah,
and to change how you do something based on that data and information that you have. So I think that's really sort of very deeply ingrained in who I am and my values. But also, so for me, it was, what are new opportunities to learn? How do I continue to build on this analytics background while still keeping up with technology and new things that are coming out? Um, Not surprisingly, after working in 2 war zones, I also needed a break. So
yeah.
getting that second master's degree in data science, afforded me both time to rest and, reevaluate where I want to go and what my next steps in the career might be,
Mhm.
while also getting quite a useful credential. So building on that, after working in both product and with a generative AI system, I was like, I need to learn more. And
Nice.
so that's what led me to your course, and why I was so interested in continuing to build in this way. I also think that this isn't going away, right? AI is not a fad, um, as much fun as those are. And so I also want to be part of the solution. I want to be part of the movement that brings something great to so many people. And this has such an opportunity for impact at scale that how could you not want to get involved? And so for me, I felt like it really built on all of the analytics, business intelligence, and product skills and experience that I have,
Yeah,
while also really focusing on still finding that through way to supporting people, right? Risk management, thinking about how do we do this right? How do we do this in a meaningful way? Slow down, be intentional about what we're doing so that we can have bigger impact.
totally. And I love that your obvious intuition at every step is to find like we need KPIs, but let's make sure they matter. What are the metrics that matter? And in this case, we're talking about, lives and changing lives, et cetera. Those are those are meaningful on a different level than a lot of tech is used to dealing with.
But there is a whole tech for good and AI for good. And, despite that, I think that really keeping people at the forefront. for me, that's what it's about.
Yeah,
So even if my next role isn't in an AI for good space,
hmm
I think that's okay as long as, I think it's important to find those like-minded people who care about managing risk, who care about keeping people front and center, both
totally.
within a company as well as your customer. So
And
yeah, that's what it's
I think
about for
that'll win
me.
out long term. I think that's definitely there's a short term trend towards seeing how much can we automate, how much we can we replace, versus the companies that actually retain trust will weather the storms that come after that. Right? Absolutely. Fantastic. So if you were to boil down your advice for folks who are looking to get into AI into like one sentence, what would you tell them?
Start small, right? If you've
Yeah.
never used ChatGPT or Claude, take your pick, Gemini,
Yeah.
whatever you fancy, whichever Copilot, whatever. Don't want to discriminate against any
Yeah.
of our systems and companies here,
We might get
but
sponsors some days on the podcast.
right, I feel like everybody is sponsored equally. um, pick one and try it out.
Yeah.
And try it out on something that is a pain point for you. What do you I can give you an example, silly
Yeah.
one. For me, I absolutely hate figuring out what I am cooking for dinner. I love to cook. I just don't want to deal with looking up the recipes. What do I have in the refrigerator?
Yeah.
And I find sometimes I'm lazy and then I don't end up cooking because I don't have the recipe in front of me, right? I don't want to
Yeah.
look in a book. I don't know why, but when my computer's out and it's the end of the day, my favorite thing to do at the end of the day is like, okay, what's for dinner?
Yeah.
Right?
Here's what I
I
got.
know I've got this in my refrigerator. Give
Yep.
me a recipe. Um,
Absolutely.
and it's such an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, please don't give it any of your health information or sensitive information. At least not
My
to
child, a
start.
boy, age 5. No, no, no.
Right, right. Please don't do that. But yeah, and then just start. And be curious.
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong thing to do.
Your
And
curiosity guide you.
if it's comfortable to treat it like Google search, treat it like Google search,
Yeah.
right? It's not a bad place to start.
Fantastic advice. And I think just start, get curious, see where it takes you. So it's taken many people far. Well, thank you so much for being on with us today, Rachel. It's been so great to deep dive into your fascinating experience. How it's crazy how so many people wouldn't necessarily right on the surface see all the relationships to from like this intense international development world to what's happening today in AI. But I think it's so hyper relevant. So thank you so much for coming on and talking today. We have one last section, and that is plugs. Rachel, how can people try out your new tool, get in touch with you?
Okay,
What's the best way for them to reach
great.
out if they're interested in either your tool or talking risk management, mitigation, crisis management in AI, et cetera?
Exactly, exactly. So either of those things, it would be great. I would love to connect. Please, you can find me on LinkedIn. My little after the backslash is Rach Beck. So that's how
We'll
you can
put the
find me
show
on
notes.
LinkedIn. Yeah, and then my email address is also in the about section should you want to reach out that way. But yeah,
Fantastic.
this has been so much fun, Polly. Thank you so much
Oh,
for having me.
of course.
And I look forward
Anytime.
to seeing you again soon and connecting with everyone else as well.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much. Once again, it's just been amazing. That's another episode of AI Product Leader. Join us next week for our next episode. Thanks so much.